So all that purple stuff you see growing on the bottom is called coralline algae. Basically what it is an algae that produces a calcium crust just like corals do. But they are an algae, they are a protist. They're slower growing than other types of algae because they have to produce this calcium crust. But it's one of the natural things here. It's considered to be the cement of the reef because it'll hold a lot of the rubble and stuff together. Different types of crabs and shrimp. So petroglyph shrimp will create burrows in the coral. So if you see these little cracks with the algae growing in them, that's a natural thing. It's the shrimp burrowing down, and they actually farm the algae on the edge of the holes, and that's what they eat. The gull crab, this is the guard crab. This is a little guy hides way down in the cauliflower coral. He'll come out and he'll pinch at whatever's trying to eat the coral and keep that coral to itself. Let's see if I have this other picture. I don't have a picture of it. There's another one called a guard crab that actually settles on top of these cauliflower corals on top of the branches, and the corals grow around it. Well, the females settle there, and the coral grows around it, and the males are really, really tiny, and the males have a harem of several females all engulfed in these holes, and the males will go from hole to hole to mate with the females, and I don't know if they bring food or whatever. That would be polite, polite thing to do, but regardless, the gull crabs are housed in there. It's a natural thing. Sometimes you'll see it, there's going to be a little pink ring around it because it's irritated, but it's not the same as the little pink dots you see, sometimes called coral zits. Those are caused by trematodes. So the trematode goes through this weird life cycle where the eggs are on the coral and they create these pink irritation, and the larvae go up into the water and then settle on a snail, or no, I think the fish eat the zit, and then the thing becomes an adult in their stomach, and then comes out the other end and then goes into a snail, and then that's where it reproduces and puts its egg back onto the coral. So it's this really complex cycle, but it is something that occurs here naturally. One of the things that people are concerned about, though, is that we're seeing it more frequently than we did in the past. Have you guys seen those before? I know there's a lot of it in this area. But, well, let's keep your eye out. If you see a big lobe coral covered in all these little pink dots, it's the little trematodes creating coral zits. Christmas tree worms. So these are those little sort of feather dusting looking things that you'll see out there. They're smaller than a dime around, smaller around than a dime. If you touch them or swish some water at them, they'll suck down into their tube. They actually will burrow right down into the coral and then extend those things out. Those are gills and feeding appendages, so that's what they use to trap oxygen in food. The short-bodied bunny, cool little guy who, is another one of the ones that sort of sets up a farm area, except he will, quote, farm coral. So he'll graze this little patch, but his comb, the little comb-like teeth will only take away little tears of the coral tissue and leave behind enough that it can grow back. And so sometimes you find a coral that's covered in all these little white circles. Well, they're not white, they're just light colored circles, and that's predation from this bunny. We have urchins are pretty common out here. The banded urchin is actually the most common urchin you can find on the reefs in Hawaii, but the ones that you'll usually see will be all black. If you look really, really closely, you might see some black and then some darker black stripes. But all the ones that are about this big out there are going to be the banded urchins. You might see the blue-black urchin, a little bit smaller, and has the blue, sort of very hard to see blue spines. It's kind of like black with a blue shimmer. You guys, I know out here, have the diademas, which are these long-spine urchins. They're their spines. Have you seen those just off the drop-off out there? The spines are like 1.5 feet long. Then collector urchins, the little round black balls that you find out there, they pull whatever up on top of their body to use as camouflage. So these urchins, and then all the stuff on this page are all in the echinoderm phylum. The red pencil urchin, all these things, all the urchins are algae eaters, so they'll go around and they'll graze algae from the reef. They're really important to keep the reef clean. So Some people think urchins are dangerous and must go, but they are important cleaners of the reef. This is kind of a tangent, but the other day someone came up to one of the volunteers at Kalu and said, why are there urchins here? And the volunteer kind of said, well, you know, urchins are herbivores and they graze on the algae and they're important for keeping our corals clean, and trying to give her a nice, like, educational answer. She says, no, no, no. Why aren't the people in charge of this park getting rid of them? They're dangerous. So we're like, well, you know, again, they're a natural part of the environment and blah, blah. Other stuff you'll see, these big black blobs you see out on the reef, those are the sea cucumbers. Also related, you know, they're also echinoderms. So the echinoderms, their sort of common characteristics, these are tube feet. So you'll see with urchins and starfish and sea cucumbers, they all have these little suction cup feet. It's part of a water vascular system, so they have all these tubes that go through their body and they use the water pressure to hang on to things. They also have pentaradial symmetry, which means symmetry in a circle based on segments of 5. But there actually is a couple species that don't follow that exact rule. For example, the chronothorns sea star has between 12 and 19 arms, so it may not necessarily have a multiple of 5, but it does have the spiny skin, it does have the tube feet, and it does have a radial symmetry anyways. I like this picture here because this shows crown of thorns actually eating the coral. So have you guys all heard of the crown of thorns before? Have you seen them out here before? Crown of thorns have this nasty reputation as being like a destroyer of all reefs worldwide. But crown of thorns are a natural predator. They were in Hawaii long before humans were. They weren't introduced. The problem with crown of thorns comes when they form these big aggregations, sometimes thousands of individual animals that climb all over the reef and can eat like square miles of it in a matter of days. And that can be really harmful. That has happened in Australia and other parts of the South Pacific. In Hawaii, there was one outbreak on Oahu, one on Molokai, several decades ago that grazed fair amounts of the reef. And then there was actually one just down in Kaupulehu just a few months ago, where I think they counted about 500 individuals, or maybe it was 200, I don't know, but they were all really close together, and just from one spot they counted over 50. And those sort of aggregations can be dangerous, but in Hawaii we don't really get those very commonly, and so kind of to take a step back, the way they eat the coral is like other sea stars. They actually extrude their stomach, and the stomach goes down and engulfs the prey, in this case coral, and it digests it outside their body and then draws in the nutrients, and then they pull their stomach back in. Which is why if you look at the base of some of these pieces of coral, you don't see, or you still see some tissue at the bottom, still see some color. And then what they'll do is they'll graze one spot, they'll just put their stomach out and then they'll take it back in, and then they'll actually walk away and go somewhere else farther away. They prefer to eat faster growing corals, so that's actually a good thing that they're getting things that can recover quickly, like the cauliflower corals and the rice corals. This one decided to eat I think that's actually a pork chop coral possibly. It's one of the Porites species. So that wouldn't be so common. But again, you know, a lot of divers and fishermen, or you know, whoever, ocean users, think that it's necessary to kill these guys because they are coral eaters. But that's not really fair, because butterfly fish are also coral eaters, and bunnies are also coral eaters, and I don't see anybody going out and wanting to kill them because they're eating the coral. What we need to be concerned about is when we see aggregations of these things. And if you or people you know like to kill them because they feel that that's the right thing to do, just make sure they don't cut them in half or cut them into quarters or whatever, because they regenerate, and if you do that, then you have 4 instead of 1. So yeah, I won't tell you what to do, but just don't do it that way, because I don't want more of them like that. Okay, so that's